To the ranch, and when we got there, everybody was swinging on the rope over the pond, and some were going in the pond and some weren't. And Ken, he says, "Oh, I know I could do that," and everybody was trying to coax him to. And his brother-in-law, Rex Adams, he had his camera all set up there to put down anything that was really good. And so Ken got over there, and he got hold of the rope, and we were kind of dressed up, semi-dressed up anyway, and he...
No, you were dressed up.
Well, for us it was dressed up, because we were going to Vegas, but anyway, he got hold of the rope and went around pretty good once, but if you don't get to the side there and hit the bank where you can get another good swing to go around, then you'll go around, but you won't reach back there if you don't do it just right. So the next thing that happened was he didn't do it right and fell right in the middle of the pond, and Rex had this all photographed and down, and so Ken went in and we pulled him out, and he just had a big grin on his face, and he took off his cowboy boots and turned them upside down to get the water out, and then he got his billfold out and was wringing it out, and so everybody got a big kick out of that. And it was all down in this little book, and Rex made him the book, and we've got quite a bit of fun showing that, but Ken's kind of embarrassed about it.
So is that your first memory of returning to the ranch, or do you have ones previous to that?
I'd been to the ranch before, and I had a lot of memories of the ranch. One time, I remember that Dad asked Ken and I if we would take him, not Mama, because she was sick that day, if he wanted to show us something down there. So we loaded up our four-wheeler and took him down, and he got on the four-wheeler with Ken, and Ken wasn't he always wanted to go a little bit faster than most people, but anyway, I think Dad got his sit down a little bit sore from riding there, but anyway, took him up this little wash, and he said that was where he was taking a load of chickens to Vegas to sell, and and when it tipped over, then all of the chickens got out of the cages, and he was able, and I'm sure he feels like the spirit helped him get all these chickens back in all their cages, and he went on and took them to Vegas to sell.
And those cages were huge.
Yes.
They were 6 or 8 feet long and 2 or 3 feet wide.
Yeah,
and
they
so
were big.
I don't know how one person could have ever gotten that wagon tipped back up and got those chickens. And he found all the chickens but one, and they got into town. They always drove at night on the desert.
Yes, that's true.
Remember that, because
It was hot.
There was no air conditioning in the wagons. And when they got into town, that one chicken was roosting on the axle.
I'd forgotten that part. But anyway, he wanted to tell that to Ken, and Ken was always said he wasn't very religious, but deep in his heart he really was. But
So why did your family start going back after, or what made you as a family start going?
well, Wilma was the first one to go back, I think, and took Dad and Mom, and you remember the pictures she took of Mom with the cactuses and stuff. And then when I had never been to the ranch before that, and Dad never took us. I think he had so many kids to feed that he had us pretty much keep working there. but what was I going to say, Wendy?
Oh, you're talking about Wilma?
Oh yeah, and Wilma, she wanted to go there, so she got Rex to take her, and the story she wrote about that was quite interesting. About Rex wouldn't do this and he wouldn't do that like she wanted, but anyway, it was a fun story. But then when we found out they'd been down there and had so much fun, we all wanted to go, and so the next time I think Julia came down with her family, and Ken and I went, and some of the others. But one time we decided to take a big trip, and we went to San Francisco, and we had not a motorhome then, but we had what is it you put on your pickup?
The
camper. And so we took the kids there and went to Chinatown, and we took the kids over to Alcatraz, and then we just went on around and went on that Queen Mary, or what was it, that's a tourist attraction now, and took them through that. And then we went to Disneyland, and we came back and went to the ranch, and the kids had more fun at the ranch than they did in all these things we'd spent good money on to entertain them. But that wasn't the first time that we had been there. I don't know that. I asked Linda the other day, that was Fred's wife. She stayed in touch with us all these years, and I asked her if she'd ever been there, and I don't think that they had ever gone with us.
Once they were married?
After they were married, I can't remember.
Did you take Fred?
I can't remember that. It seems like we must have, because we took Colin one time, and his mother didn't want him to stay out there over Sunday, even though we had sacrament meeting over there, and she came out to get him. So we must have had Fred, because Colin came out, and that's his best friend. And she said she didn't know it was so far out there, or she wouldn't have done it, wouldn't have come. But anyway, we've sure had some wonderful times out there, and I think it just meant so much to my dad. And I can remember one time he had fried chicken the night before in Dutch ovens, and there was some left over. So I remember that Dad decided he would. So he loved fried chicken better than anybody I ever knew, but he wanted to warm that up for breakfast. So he picked up the Dutch oven and accidentally tipped it over into all that sand. He said, this is what he said. He said, I've done a lot of things in my life that I didn't want to do, and that's one of them. And I thought that was kind of cute. But got another question. I can't think. One thing I remember is when we went out at Easter time, that we hid all these eggs in the rocks, and on Easter morning the kids were all gathering eggs, and it looked like the first resurrection. Everybody came up out of the rocks where they'd slept. It was a lot of fun. I feel sorry for families that haven't had as much fun as we have down there.
So, I want to tell you a funny story about that. So, we had all those Easter eggs, and we had a bunch extra ones. And so they went and stuck them on the cactus, and then Ray Brown had made that black powder rifle, right?
Oh, yes.
And all of, my dad was never a hunter, but all of his brother-in-laws were. And so they tried to convince my dad to shoot one of those Easter eggs. Because none of them could do it, because, black powder, you shoot it and you pull the trigger and it goes flash, and then the bullet goes, like a quarter of a second later. And so they would flinch. So my dad, didn't have that problem because he hadn't ever shot. It wasn't much of a shot. So we sat down there and lined up and shot and hit that egg the first time. And though his brother-in-laws were so upset and they wanted him to do it again and he wouldn't.
Did it go off again?
Why would I shoot that again? I got it the first time. And why would I do that again? And for the rest of that trip,
Okay.
they kept trying to get him to go over there and do that again. Because I think they were quite upset that my dad had hit it and they had, I don't know, but I just remember that they weren't happy with the fact that, they weren't happy with that. Anyway.
Well, you can't blame them.
Things you remember. Because, Ray Brown always brought something different every year. To build a camper trailer.
Yeah.
Or build a black powder rifle or something.
Yep, he did.
Anyway, but my dad always said that it wasn't a trip to the ranch unless all of his kids wore the seat out of 2 or 3 parapets.
This is true.
Climbing those rocks.
Yes, I think Janice always put patches on hers before they went, and then the patches got wore out.
Yeah.
But we did have fun, didn't we?
So what were some of the fun experiences? What are some of the things that you remember? Because there were a lot of us down there. I mean,
There was.
All of the kids, all of the son-in-laws, and daughter-in-laws, and then the children. I remember that on Easter, the Adamses had a tent, and they put toys around the tent for their kids.
Uh-huh.
But none of the rest of us poor relations could have any of those. We got the eggs, but not the stuff that was around the tent. And I remember walking around that tent being so jealous that those, anyway. But, what was it about going out to the ranch that was so special to Grandpa and Grandma and to you? And
I think it's just that we got to all be together as a family, for one thing, and got to, the cousins got to know each other a little better. But the one thing I really remember, and this doesn't maybe go with what you thought, but I remember we used to do skits, and we had worked up one where we were showing how hard it was for us to put that camper on the pickup, which was no easy task. And we had somebody on each corner, the kids, and Ken yelling at us what to do. And but anyway, so we demonstrated that, but your folks just outdid everybody. Your mother, I don't know if it's probably her idea or what, but you all were doing, you were cows, and you would say, moo, 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 or something like that. We all thought that was the prize skit that was down there, was you guys. Can you remember doing the moo, moo, moo?
I remember that, but mostly I remember that my mom and dad were the curtains that opened and closed.
Yeah.
And they'd close and they'd kiss each other. And then they'd open back up for the next group to do it.
Well,
the thing I remember a lot is the meetings that we had.
Oh, yes.
Where people got up and talked about the special. You know, sitting out there looking out over the east, you know, over toward Grand Canyon.
Uh-huh.
You know, by the rock house, between the rock house and the pond. And people would get up and talk about.
Yeah, we had a sacrament meeting, and it was really special. And then, like I say, we did the skits and things, but there wasn't as many of us then, and we could do more things than we did later, but it seemed like now that more people just hang to their own family when we get down there, but it couldn't stay the same as that was. So it was just a really fun thing to do, and Ken, he's always loved our family anyway, because he came from just a family of two, him and his brother, and they didn't do a lot of stuff together, and it was during the Depression when people were poor for sure, but
yeah.
Somehow our folks, I can remember there was a plate in one of the kitchen cupboards, and there was always a little bit of change there, so if we needed a penny for a pencil or something, we could take one of those pennies, or they used to have penny candy that was really good, so we would sometimes sneak a penny and go get some candy, but anyway, it's just I thought, a fun time to grow up. And Mom and Dad never did make us feel like we were poor. Of course, everybody else was poor too, so maybe that was reason. And Mama made all our clothes. We could go to bed at night and wake up and 2 or 3 dresses would be hanging up. But then Mama was really sick one time, and Julia, we call her St. Julia now because she always was there to bail us all out. Excuse my throat, but...
Do you need a drink?
Yes, I do. I'll have a little bit of the Diet Pepsi. That solves everything.
We can trim the Diet Pepsi out.
I told them to be sure and not put one in my casket like they did Ken and his Mountain Dew.
But why do you think it was so special to Grandpa and Grandma? Because the love they had for the ranch and the pockets. I remember the last year that Grandpa was out there, and he was getting old and couldn't get around. And I had a brand new car.
Yeah.
This was not an ATV. This was a brand new Buick Regal.
And that road was terrible then.
And he wanted to go out and see all those places, the Devil's Throat and the Indian Ridings and all those places. And my mother said, he died within the next year.
Yeah.
And my mother said that Dad wanted to say goodbye to all those rocks.
Yeah.
Things. Why do you think it was so special to Grandpa and Grandma?
Well, because that's where he was raised, and he had to do a lot of things alone. The story of the whistle story about when he heard the whistle when he had dropped his bedroll off her.
Right.
Then he did a lot of things alone at 14 years of age, and a young kid. Grandma had 3 children when she married Grandpa Whitney, you knew that, but
Yeah, Grandpa Luke Whitney.
yeah, and
Three children, yeah.
they had saved and sent Uncle Alfred and Uncle, what's the other guy that went to the army?
Cyphus.
Huh?
Alfred and Cyphus.
Alfred Cyphus and
Oh no, Cyphus was the last.
that was their grandma's.
Levi.
Levi. They were her first. They were from her first husband, and Aunt can't remember her name. They got killed, and they were going to church down the street there from their house in Overton, and they took their little girl Afton, who is the same age as Dorothy and me, or in between us. We're a year apart. In I can't think of her name. Agnes. And what was I telling?
Oh, that they got killed.
Yeah, they got killed there.
Who did?
And Aunt Agnes and whatever her husband's name was. I think their last name was Murphy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Murphy boys.
The Murphy
My mother
boys,
was
yeah.
always so scared of.
Yeah, well, they were scary.
Swimming in the ditch. And
Yeah.
they'd come out of the ditch and they'd shake their things.
I know.
My dad always said when he met them many years later, trying to imagine them shaking
Yeah.
their penis at him.
Yeah.
My mother.
And we were all so bashful anyway, because,
Yeah.
Out there by ourselves a lot. But anyway, I don't remember a lot about St. Thomas, except that they grew asparagus really well down there. It's the right soil for it. And, when asparagus grows up, then it's quite a big bush. And I can remember my sisters putting me up on top there because I was just a little girl. And I thought that was so good. I bet I smelled good too on asparagus. You know how that smells. It's sure good to eat though, but which I didn't even like to eat it for many years. Now it's my favorite vegetable.
Yeah. But Grandpa, for whatever reason, just loved the desert. There's
Yeah,
a story
I'm trying to think.
in the book where he talks about how now driving across the desert at 50 or 60 miles an hour, which that tells you how old that story is back in the 60s, that you don't get to know the desert, and how you got to know that he got to know the desert.
That's true.
Because, horses and wagons, and I remember he talked about when they were doing freighting out to the mines. Grandpa Luke would read the Book of Mormon and Added Upon and other church books to Grandpa Fenton. They were driving the horses out there because the horses just drove themselves. They knew where they were going.
Yeah, they did. But I think Dad always said that he thinks he turned out as religious as he was. I don't think that's quite how I said it, but it's because he had these two half-brothers that came home they'd go out and drink all night and come home and throw up all over the place, and he knew he didn't want that for himself. And then I'm sure with Grandpa reading the scriptures and things to him too had a lot to do with it.
Well, the two older brothers went to World War I, didn't they?
Yeah, I don't know if Uncle Alfred did. I can't remember about that. I remember Uncle Alfred would come over. We lived a block apart, and he would just come to the kitchen door, and might be eating or whatever, and he wouldn't sit down to eat, but he'd sit there and talk to Dad. And Lamar, his son, we always thought he was so handsome, and he would come over, and Dad and him would kind of fight. I mean, play fight, and we was just afraid that Lamar was going to really hurt Dad. We was just screaming at him. But we used to play out on the lawn a lot in the summer, no air conditioning, and we slept out quite a bit too. And a lot of people did then because there was no air conditioning. It's hot upstairs too.
Yeah.
But it was a fun growing up. I mean,
My daughter was one day said, now who was it who told the story of when they moved out of St. Thomas that Grandpa Whitney didn't want to leave the lawn unmowed? And so he would, so they could see him out there mowing the lawn, and they could only see his hat because the rest of him is underwater. And I said, Whitney, one of the things you have to know about Uncle John is he's a liar.
That's true. But that's one of his favorite stories, and I told that down at the ranch. It got so there wasn't very many people there, but Beth and her boyfriend then, she went with Lewis Brown. Calvin had died, and they were quite... We did a lot of stuff with Beth and Lewis, but anyway, we took Lewis and Ken, and they wanted to know something. They wanted us to tell something about our family and stuff, and so I told them the story about, they wanted to know if we were there when the water came up, which we were not, but anyway, so I told the story that John loves to tell, that he was sitting on Mama's lap and this hat was going back and forth across the water because they hadn't moved out, and she said, he said, I said to Mama, he was a baby when he was the last baby born in St. Thomas. He said, Mama said, that's your dad. He said he'd mow the lawn come hell or high water. So.
Oh, I've never heard that part of the story.
That's the way John tells it all the time.
Oh, yeah.
He's got one other, and he told to, he liked to tell that he had to wear hand-me-downs all the time. And they said, we all had to wear hand-me-downs. Yes, but you didn't have
5 older
sisters.
Yeah.
Okay, we gotta stop because we're running out of.
You run up.
When Dad asked
Clip
Mom,
this on your collar.
when Dad asked Mom to marry her, to marry him, she said no. She said yes before he could change his mind. I just thought that was funny. And then she said, but under one condition, and that's that you'll take me home to visit my mother one time a year.
That's right.
Because they lived up in Cache Valley. And you know, I think part of that going down to the desert was Dad keeping that promise.
Yeah.
Because Mother loved to be around her sister.
We all like to be together, that's for sure.
And I remember right after I bought the ranch, and we redid Grandpa's cabin, because that cabin, I always tease people that cabin, the back, because the whole back wall had collapsed.
It was a mess.
and the whole back lane had collapsed. And I said, you know, I just imagine Grandpa Fenton and Grandpa Luke standing there like that, saying, I'll be glad when somebody comes along and fixes this so we can go do something else. And so we fixed it. But I remember, you know, some of you sisters came out after we got that cabin fixed up and had a bathroom so that
Yeah, that was wonderful.
You hadn't been out for several years. But you just seemed to love being out there with your sisters. You and Mom.
I don't know.
No, my mother had died by then. By the time I bought the ranch, my mother had died. But, you know, you and Janice and I mean, and Anna, you would, and one time we tried to videotape you out there, but it didn't work because you just got telling stories and laughing and talking over each other.
Yeah, we all want to say our piece for sure.
And Beth. But you seemed, and so maybe it wasn't so much the ranch as it was just you loved being together as
I
sisters.
think that was it too, yeah.
Or kind of both. I remember when Beth's son, that's my age, right after he got married, they did a skit about Grandpa and Grandma getting married. And then they went and threw him in the pond.
Oh, yeah.
Because apparently Grandpa was throwing the pond on married.
When they got married, yeah.
What was that called that they used to do?
On the
It was a thing where you'd take the wife and drop her off in one town, the husband another. It was
I'd much rather
shivery.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that was their shivery, was throwing Grandpa in the pond. And when I was redoing the cabin, up in the top of the cabin, those rafters are all scorched. And that cabin had burned. And so I think it was the Nay guy was out running back and forth in the pond in his long-handled underwear, as Marilyn said, throwing water up there trying to get that out. Hey, I've had a question I've wanted to ask somebody who might know. I heard that there was another cabin down where the rock house is now, that Keith tore down when he put the rock house there. Is that true?
I think there was, I can remember staying out there once by the rock cabin, and it seemed like there was another part on it. And it seemed like we slept just outside of there. I can't remember that time, but I know we slept right close there. And I thought since, did I make that up in my forehead or what?
Yeah, and it's interesting because as I take people around, there are slip scrapers. And I don't know if you remember what a slip scraper was.
I don't.
But a slip scraper, 2 horses pulled it. And it was a bucket. It was like a wheelbarrow with no wheel. And you had 2 handles, and you'd go along. When you needed to dig dirt, you'd lift up on the handles and fill up the slip scraper, and then you'd push it down and slide along the ground, and then you'd lift it up.
Yeah.
And that's how they built all those terraces. And then they had another thing they built where they cut big, thick pieces of lumber and did the same kind of thing, and that's how they got the rocks over there to put up the terrace walls. And the county wanted us to tear down those terrace walls. And the county commissioner down there, Marilyn Kirkpatrick, actually has a ranch in Utah, and she was a cowgirl. And she just tore into those.
She could do it.
Because these were inspectors out of Las Vegas. And they said, well, those stairs aren't level, and those rock walls aren't safe. And Marilyn said, we are trying to preserve our history. And here is somebody who's spending his own money to preserve the history out there.
Yeah.
And you're going to want him to tear that all down? And she really got mad at him. And boy, after that, they were very nice to me. And it wasn't so much me. It was just that the fact that all of that history, those rock walls, I mean, to imagine the work
Yeah.
that Grandpa Luke and I'm sure the Cyphus boys and Grandpa, but Grandpa Whitney Fenton. Remember the story about Halley's Comet?
I remember that they were all scared of it.
They were scared of it, and Grandpa they owned Pawcoon Ranch for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he was out there at Pawcoon Ranch, and he was coming home, and they always came at night, and Halley's Comet was up there, and they were afraid that Halley's Comet was going to hit the earth and destroy it. And he was riding through the Joshua forest, and a lightning storm came up, and lightning started striking those Joshua trees. And when the lightning would strike, it would and he was only 12 or 13.
Yeah, he had lots of responsibility.
I was afraid of the dark when I was 12 or 13.
Well, now they would have called it child abuse. Leaving him out there alone.
Yeah, well, he was down in the pockets by himself.
Right.
And remember they held that miner that lived up there that came to Sunday dinner every week. And then one week he didn't show up, so they went up. And he had fallen off the cliff. And they think he had gotten sick and delirious and had come out and fallen off. So the coroner's inquest was held in Grandpa's tent down in Whitney's pocket.
Oh, I know that there was a time when they were thinking about doing his temple work and they didn't even know his name.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if they ever did it or not, but...
Yeah, and we used to go down and go look at the pockets that Grandpa built. And then Keith was, he was at war with BLM. And so he tried to seal that dam that never held water. So he put 6 inches he put down tar on the dam, and then he put down 6 inches of concrete. And then you couldn't get down those steps because it was just too narrow. And so I went up there one day with the jackhammer, and a handheld jackhammer and my generator and my saw, and I jackhammered off enough of that concrete that we could go through. And somebody said, "So what happened to that concrete?" I said, "I don't know. I came out there one day and..."
You better edit that out.
And it had just fallen down into the... But now you can go back down and see and you can still see Grandpa. We need to go out and put some water on that and take a picture of that because it's getting dimmer over the years.
Oh, I remember one time Nada took me on her four-wheeler and took me all to places I'd heard about but hadn't ever been. The 200, that place, is that what it's called, the 200?
No, there's...
I'd never been down there.
Oh, the 300.
300.
Oh, the 300.
Yeah.
That didn't sound, 200 didn't sound quite right. But anyway, she really showed me the ranch in a way I'd never seen it before, so.
Yeah, the 300, I asked Marilyn why it was called the 300. She said, "I don't know." She said, "The story that makes the most sense to me is that one year the miners were designated by the level they worked at. So the deeper in the mine they worked, the more they got paid."
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And there was a 300-foot level, so you're down quite a bit. And it had flooded that year or something, but they didn't mine that year. And so the half a dozen miners that mined at the 300-foot level came over and asked Grandpa Luke for a job. And he said, I don't think he had money to pay him, but he took them down to the 300, and he said, if you'll clean the rocks out of here, because there's so much water up above it. And so then he could grow crops down there. Was about, 10 or 12 acres that you could grow crops down there, and the water could get down there. Now we've actually put a pressurized irrigation system down there.
Is there still those good apples and apricots?
We have the apple trees have mostly died, and the apricot trees have, but the pomegranate trees are still. And there are pomegranates up there that they're not red, they're pink.
Those are the best kind.
Those are the best kind.
Are they the sweet
red
ones?
ones are sour.
We've got, I think, is that one of the ones that you got from Grandpa? Is that one from here that you got from there? That's out in the corner of your yard?
Yeah, Grandpa, my dad, had 2 pomegranate bushes come up on his place over where he lived there at last,
Yeah, that last house.
He said, I'll give you one of them. And so he came over and planted it in the corner of my place. It's still there and still gets really good pomegranates on it. But his ended up being the big, beautiful ones that are sourer than heck.
Yeah, well...
But some people like them better than they do the sweet ones.
Well, the guy that runs the ranch, that manages the ranch for me, I sold him 4 or 5 acres down the bottom of 300, right up at the edge where the cliff comes off, because it was kind of worthless. There were ravines and all sorts of things, and so it didn't look like it was worth much to me. And I had invested enough out there that I needed someone out there. So I sold him that, and he got it all cleaned up, and he loves trees. And so he's put a whole new orchard in.
Of what?
He has like 20 different varieties of trees. One, he waited 4 years to get it.
Wow.
But he has, the pomegranate trees weren't bearing fruit, and he fertilized them and dug them up and cleared them out, and last year I got a case of the best pomegranates I've ever eaten.
I bet, if you had the pink ones.
Yeah, the pink ones are a lot better than the red ones.
Yeah, you can only...
they are.
But the red ones, they get really big. Every year Grandma Tobler would bring up a gunny bag full of the red ones, and I don't know, they make the best jelly, but and a gunny bag full of the pink ones, and Mama could just fix those. She would sometimes peel a bunch of them and then put them in some milk and sugar, and we just thought that was wonderful.
Oh, yeah. We were going home once from the desert, and we got 5 miles past Beaver, and the motor blew up. And so we had to sit in this car, and it was kind of hot. It was in the spring. But Nada was so scared that she made us keep the windows rolled up and the doors locked. And the only food we had was pomegranates and some fig Newtons. And so Ray and Glenn hiked back into Beaver.
Oh, wow.
And my dad was only 5 miles in front of us. So every hour they called. And he walked in the door, the phone was ringing, he picked it up. And it was Glenn and Ray back in Beaver. So he had Rex Adams go pick us up in Beaver, from Richfield. And then he rested that night and came, and they took the car back up. But then the motor was ruined. It was my dad owned 2 Edsels.
I remember that.
And so, anyway, I don't know. What other things can you remember about? I mean, the thing I remember more than anything is how much Grandpa and Grandma loved going to the ranch.
Oh, they did love it. And I remember my dad loved to dance with Mama. And do you remember when he danced with her down there? And they were
call you sweetheart.
Yep. And
and he'd kick things out of his way to dance with her. Oh,
I know.
I had forgot about that.
When we went to school, after every ball game, they had a what they called a student body dance, and that was when people danced. I don't think they do much but dancing.
In a museum where people can go in and watch videos and have pictures on the walls.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Because people want, it's interesting. I had a friend, a kid who was up there working with the guy I had, and he had been a meth addict, and he had finally kicked it. But he was not religious at all. And he said to me once, he said, when you're over by the pond, do you ever feel anything? And I said, well, what do you mean feel anything? And he said, do you ever feel? And I said, you mean like the Spirit of the Lord? And I said, absolutely. I said, many times when I'm standing by the pond, I think if I turned around, I would see my grandfather.
That's where they spent their first wedding. After they were married, they stayed at the ranch all one summer just by themselves and took care of it, as I understand it. I thought that's in Mama's story. I can't remember for sure. I've got to reread that book.
You were telling about how Grandpa, the dances that Grandma and Grandpa would go to, and how Grandpa...
Oh, they hired Grandpa. He took every little job. He was even the judge for one time. He married people there in the living room in these transoms that are over the old houses, above the doors.
Yeah.
So kids would want to see that, so we'd move something over so we could look through the transom and see Dad marrying somebody till he caught us, and then, boy, we didn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But then he also would take tickets at the dances, and they called him a bouncer because if anybody was drinking and they weren't supposed to be in there, he would kick them out. But he'd always come and dance with each one of us. And that was after his leg was hurt even, and that foot always turned out sideways. Remember how that looked? And it was a little bit hard to dance with him, but we was always proud to get to do it.
Oh, yeah.
What about dancing with Grandma?
Oh, and he was so always coming home and grabbing Mama and dancing around the house with her. And one thing I knew for sure is that my dad loved Mama.
Oh, yeah.
She loved him too. But they did have their ups and downs like we all do in our marriage,
Oh,
But,
yeah.
But
I remember the story of Grandpa Fenton was using molasses to oil the PTO on the baler. Do you remember this story?
no, I never heard it.
Well, he they had grease, of course, but grease was expensive and molasses was free. So he'd pour. So if the PTO, ever got making noise, he'd pour some molasses on.
Looked like that'd make it stick.
One time he got his sleeve in that PTO and it flipped him over the top of the baler, and took every stitch of clothes
Oh, yes,
off
I do
except
remember
his
that story.
garment.
Yeah, I do.
And it was across the street from the church. And so he, and it was Relief Society. That was back when Relief Society. So he had to walk over to the church to get Grandma to go take him home so he could put some clothes on. And they had a ward auction that year at the ward party. And they auctioned off the gallon of molasses that D-Pants President Whitney.
Yep, I do remember that now.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
that we're close, but whatever.
Okay.
What do you think? That gives her.
I just,
Okay.
I just remember the love of the family down there. And one time I was climbing up the pockets across the street, and my hat fell off and kind of fell down. And so I went to get the hat, and then I realized that I'd climbed someplace that I couldn't get out of.
Do you want me to
And it was just a little ledge that I could hold on to get out.
Wow.
And my mom and dad were sitting over there watching me nearly kill myself. And so I got the hat and got down. When I got the other side, my mother said, "So is that hat worth it?" You know, it was funny. I thought, well, I guess that's the advantage of being the 8th of 10 children, is she wasn't too worried about it, because
I remember when we came up to surprise Julia once on her birthday.
oh yeah, they're toward the end of her life.
Yeah,
Oh, that my mother loved that.
we surprised her. And anyway, we remember you coming there and was telling about how you were sitting there with your Bible open, reading it so good, and all of a sudden your mother grabbed you and took you outside by the hair of the head and gave you a big licking.
Oh, it was,
And
That's
you said,
incongruous.
but you was trying to make it sound like you.
That's how I told the story.
That's how you told the
It
story.
was-
But I
it
knew
was-
that wasn't the truth, but we
So
sure got a
the
kick out of it.
The old First Ward Chapel was the stake center, because the stake center got knocked over in the earthquake of 1954. And I used to, and my mother, I don't know what I did, but I infuriated her. And I was on about 3 rows back from the funeral doors on that
Yeah.
on the north side of the church. And she grabbed me and picked me up, and she took me out those funeral doors. And she gave me a spanking. I don't think I called it a beating, and it felt like it at the time.
Well, probably nowadays they would have put her in jail for
Probably.
child abuse.
I only spanked my kids. I spanked all of them once, and that cured them.
Well,
So I would, when I told that story, I would always say we were sitting there in conference, and I was listening to the speaker, and I had my scriptures open, and I was marking them. All of a sudden, my mother picked me up and yanked me and hauled me up and beat me, and I lost my place in the scriptures. And my mother,
we got a big kick out of that.
my mother had no recollection of what I had done to make her so angry. But she did remember the incident.
Yeah.
And we would laugh and laugh about that. Because we both knew that I deserved what I mean, I don't think she thought I deserved what I got. But I was always climbing over the benches and under the benches and through the benches.
Well, I don't know how you keep track of 10 kids when you're...
I don't know how my poor mother,
Like I say, she was a saint for
she
sure.
was a saint. And you know, it's interesting. My older brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws think that my dad took care of my mother. The younger son-in-laws and sister-in-laws think my mother took care of my dad, you know, because he got diabetes and stuff. But in reality, they're both right. You know, my mother had 6 kids in 7. Those last 6 of us were born in 7 years.
Wow.
And the doctor told her after Gary was born that if she had another baby, she would die. And so Dad, and back then you had to get 3 doctors to certify in order to get a hysterectomy. And she wouldn't go, and so my dad went and tracked down 2 doctors that he knew and twisted their arm, got them to sign the paper, and then the one doctor that had told him that, he signed. And she said, I won't go, I won't go, I won't go.
She thought it was her duty to have all the kids that came. She thought it was her duty to have all the kids
that came. And my dad called Fenton and told her and told him what the doctors had said and what my mother was doing. And my mother and Fenton, Grandpa Fenton, got on the phone with my mother and said, you have to raise those children you have. Your duty is not to have more children, it's to raise the children you have. And I will stand before the judgment bar of God and say, you did what you had to do.
Yeah.
And, you know, and hearing it from my dad, she didn't believe it. I think she thought he was going to hell. But no, I don't think she thought he was going to hell. But when her father told her that, then she relented enough that Dad could get her in the car and take her to the hospital.
Yeah.
But she was mad at him for a very long time.
Oh, I remember that she just didn't think that was the right thing to do.
And for 6 or 8 months, she didn't talk to him. She wouldn't talk to him because she thought he had done the wrong thing. And then one day, Dad noticed she was talking to him, and he said to her, "So are you feeling better about the decision?" And she didn't really say yes, but she didn't say no either.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's off to the side.
Yeah.
So are there any final questions that we should have asked? And if so, what would they be about the ranch for someone else to answer or to continue with the interviews?
Well, it's hard to just think right now, but...
Well, what about Ken? Why did I know initially Ken didn't come a lot, but I think he was on the truck a lot.
Yeah, he was.
But then when he wasn't on the truck so much, he came out every year.
Yeah, he loved it. He loved it out there.
Why did he love it? He wasn't Whitney, he wasn't...
No. He just loved our family. I don't know why, but he always loved our family. He just thought if I ever was in a blue mood and was being ornery, he'd say, "Go out to your mother. She always makes you feel better." He'd haul me out there, and I'd visit with Mama, and then he'd come and get me. He just, like I say, I think he was meant to be born in a big family because he sure enjoyed everything our family did together. And his family, like I say, they were really poor at the time, and it was a hard time for them. But
well, the Depression was a hard time. I remember the thing I remember about when you sisters all came up to surprise my mother
Yeah.
for her birthday, they were talking about this old miser that lived up the street, and they were talking about this miser. And Beth said, "You can't say that, because he came down one day and gave Mother, and I don't remember, it was a few $100s. And he swore her to secrecy. And then when Mom found out, when Grandma Whitney found out that Beth knew, he swore her to secrecy. And she had never told anyone.
Never told me.
Until that day. And he allowed himself to be thought of as this mean old miser who would just let people starve to death. When in fact, if he walked down to give your mother, and I think it was $200 or $300, which was a lot of money.
Boy, that was.
I remember my mother came home one year from working in the war plants and brought home presents for all you kids.
Yeah, she did.
Because she knew that, I think Grandpa was still laid up from his leg.
Yeah, she was just like a second mother to us. She made us dresses and did all kinds of things. And she worked there at the power company, and so I think she was the sole supporter of the family.
She worked at the power company?
Yeah, she worked in the office and, taking people's money for the bills and things.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure she did that. Maybe I'll have to...
Maybe she did. But I knew she went up to Cedar City College for one semester. And all they had was beans to eat and milk. They had milk tickets that they could go over and get.
Yeah, she came home one time, and the bus didn't come through Hurricane.
Right.
And she had to get out and walk.
I was telling Leroy this story, that she got out because she told the bus driver that there was a house there she could knock on the door.
Yeah.
And the bus driver says, "Nobody's lived in that house for years." She said, "Oh, I'm sure it does." She got there and found out nobody lived in that house.
There wasn't very many cars went by, but when they did, she said she run and hid. She wouldn't think of asking my folks to get up and come over and get her.
That's what she said. "You just didn't call my dad and ask him to come get you." It was a different time.
It was. There's a lot, I know in Ken's family, he had uncles that left home at 14 and made their own way.
Yeah.
So it was, like I say, it was a different time.
But there was a car wreck down the street a little while, and she kept trying to walk down there, but then she'd get scared. But she finally went down there, and there'd been a car wreck. Police was there, and then there was two kids she went to high school with who took her home.
Oh, so she did get... I can't remember the whole story, but I remembered that she wouldn't think of calling them to come and get her.
Yeah, she just... No. She wouldn't think of calling Grandpa Finn to drive to St. George.
Yeah.
But...
Anyways, it's been a great life. All 94 years of them.
Yeah.
Almost. Yeah. Next week.
I just hope I'm not here to be 100.
Next Friday is her birthday.
Oh, I'm going home next Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah.
But we are excited. We put up 3 teepees at the ranch. And we've put
up... Boy, the kids will love that.
6 log cabins that are... And then we have we put up 3 bathroom stalls that have showers, and they're nice.
Oh, my word.
And then,
I remember getting up after everybody was in bed and going down and getting in the pond to get clean.
Yeah, well, we have water heaters in all the bathrooms so
Oh.
you can take a hot
Oh,
shower.
there's one thing I did want to say, and that's because the Olympics have been on, but one year they had the Olympics, so we decided we'd have an Olympics down there.
Oh yeah,
Do you remember that? And
I do.
all us women lined up and run a race, and the men all run a race. And we was trying to do
We'd
it.
do sack races.
Yeah,
And we did a lot of the old time games,
Yeah.
you know, Rolo
yep.
and stuff.
I said we had a good childhood, even though it was could be hard, I guess, if you thought about it now. If I thought about, having to do all that stuff, but we always planted. I can remember planting the seeds when Dad would plant a garden on our lot, But
Yeah, I remember.
I know we didn't do near the work we should have. Mama,
I know your dad would never plant lawn because that was a waste
of ground.
of good ground. And one day he had hurt himself because he was moving dirt from the front of the yard to the backyard. And he said, well, sometimes I need it in the back and sometimes I need it in the front. When my mother was kind of chiding him.
Did you remember when we lived in the other house in town?
Which one? The one down here by the church?
Yeah.
300 on 300?
I know. I remember the first house I remember was the one out on the dairy farm.
Yeah, boy, have you seen what they've done to that?
Uh-huh.
Build a great big house out of it.
Wow.
Isn't that the one?
Yeah, it's got 2 stories and it's probably 3 times as big now, maybe.
Is the dairy barn still there?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Because I know the Hawkinses lived in that dairy barn. Cause
Yeah, well,
Grandpa-
Mom and Dad did first, too, before they got their house built, but...
And they lived in there because he'd quit milking cows by then.
Yeah.
And
People used to come out and bring their own bottle, and you could get, fill the bottle and
for milk,
yeah. Lots of people paid. Most people paid, but there's a few that always would say, "We'll pay you next time," and that never came.
But Grandpa,
He figured they needed the milk, and that's okay.
yeah,
But he was a good man. Mom and Dad, I always say they're the best parents anybody could ever have. And
Well-
that's what we're supposed to think about our parents.
and Luke, I tell people the story of how Luke ended up marrying Julia, because
No, nobody else.
the bishop and him talked about, how did Julia's first husband die? Was he the one
I
who was
don't
killed
remember
in the
how he
wash?
died. We need to find that out. I don't remember.
I think he was killed in the wash braiding.
I don't know. There was dangerous times there. There's lots of bad people around and lots of good people, but
Yeah, I remember he built the tree house way up in a
Yeah.
cottonwood tree and the ladder. And so that Julia could go up and take her kids up and pull the ladder up.
yeah,
Because there were desperados in St. Thomas.
yeah,
and
that's
they'd
true.
drive up and down, ride them down the street shooting guns.
And then that bad Indian that came to Grandma's place that time, and I can't remember what she did, but she scared him off, and Indians think if you're brave, that's a good thing. And
Oh.
so he didn't harm her, but I think she scared him to death.
Yeah, on my dad's side, his mother's parents were. Dad was a polygamist. One of them lived over by Brigham City, right next to the railroad.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one lived over by Bear Lake. And he got a letter that the people over in Bear Lake were sick. So he put on his snowshoes and went over those 2 mountain ranges.
Wow.
And his wife didn't know whether he had made it or not until the next spring. But she had a big dog because he would be over at the other place on time. And, living on the railroad tracks, the hobos would come by. And there was a hobo that came by that beat on the door and said to let him in and get some food. So she talked to him, had one of the boys go out back and open the door, send the dog out after him. And when the dog came back, it had a piece of pants in his jaw.
We used to have a lot of beggars then. Like I say, it was a depression and people didn't have home. They'd camp in the wash or something. But Mama always gave them a loaf of bread and a bottle of peaches.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, they were good people.
Yeah. And then there was a CC camp up above town, and they would have an open house once a year, and we got to go up there, and they'd give us sandwiches made out of bakery bread, which we didn't get very often.
No.
And we just thought that was better than cake. They'd give us that and some lunch meat and a lettuce, on it. But it's just so much different from when I was a little girl than it is now.
Yeah, it's a different world. It's a very different world now than when I was a kid. Because my kids would say to me, well, if you didn't have cell phones and your parents went out to dinner or something, if you needed to get hold of them, how did you get hold of them? I said, you didn't.
There was no way unless they called you.
If they called you, then you could talk to them. Otherwise, you went to the neighbors.
Yeah. Well, not very many people even had indoor plumbing when we first came here.
Right.
But my dad had got paid good for his, he got paid more for his house uptown that we didn't actually live in, but he owned it. And then he did his whole farm.
Right.
And so Ken said that's why he married me, because he thought we were really rich.
Yeah, rich.
Because when we got married, they had only had a bathroom in the house for a few months.
Oh.
And he thought that was just wonderful. But everybody was still, the WPA came along and they built these fancier outdoor privies, with a cement bottom and everything.
Yeah, they called them an FDR.
Yeah. Anyways, it was just a different time. I mean,
I got to tell you a funny story. So, a few years before Mom died, a lot of people wanted to go over and go down to St. Thomas. So we went over, but I'd been down to St. Thomas the year before, and I didn't think it changed that much. And my mother certainly wasn't up to walking down.
Yeah.
So we just sat in the car and visited. And some people came up from California and were reading a sign about St. Thomas and about how the federal government came and bought them and, moved them off so that they could build like me. And these people were talking about how terrible it was the government did this. And my mother would never interrupt somebody else's conversation for nothing. She was just, she's
a good listener.
She was a good listener, but she didn't interrupt people.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I heard my mother saying, excuse me. And I thought, what? And I looked over and she was, talking to them. And she said, and they finally looked at her and she said, I was born and lived in St. Thomas till I was 10 years old. And she said, you don't know what you're talking about. She said, the best thing that ever happened to our family was when was when we were bought out by the government.
That's true.
Because she said they got more money for that acre that was right next to where the train station would have been had they had built it. And than he did for the farm. And then so he bought a new car and he traded in the old one. And my mother always remembered this, talked about it many times.
When he had the farm, the cows were out there, he'd yell up to us to get up. And before he went out, when we heard that old pickup coming back, when he'd do that, we'd pick up a shoe and put it on the ground like we were getting up. And then we'd jump up quick and get dressed quick.
Well, but anyway, so he got a brand new car and he traded in the old Model T pickup. And she said they brought the new car out from Moapa. The dealer was in Moapa. And two guys came out with big old sledgehammers. And they just opened up the engine casing and just broke up that engine. Because, of course, the car companies didn't want to take the cars in as trade-ins because that was taking away another sale.
Yeah.
And so they just destroyed them. And it always bothered my mother, because my mother didn't like throwing things away. Trust me, I grew up in that house. I know.
I know. She did. She could do anything. Your mother, she was an artist.
That's the problem is she could look at something, say, well, I could do this with this or this with this.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, that's all I have is time, believe
And
me.
if there's a time when you want to sit down and think more about the ranch, and because really what we're trying to do is explain why the ranch means so much to our family. And we did get a fair amount of that in here. But if you think of other things, and you have a computer now, we can set you up on Zoom and
I would like to get your email address and
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I can give it to you. I have
all
it.
of that.
Yeah, okay.
We can communicate.
But anyway, and I've got to go to this thing that I came to town for, so maybe we'll go talk to Anna tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'm
And
going to
then-
stop this. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome.
And
Good to see you guys again.
I might
Because I doubt that I'll get to come to the ranch.
try and get down to see
I'm gonna try.
Janice. How's Janice doing?
Pardon?
How's Janice doing?
Well, I think she's pretty good. She just went back
Let
to...
me take these off here.
To working?
She got back. She just went on a trip.
Oh,
Where was it?
Um,
Iceland?
no, I don't remember.
I think the worst thing I ever did was take you women to Israel. Because after that,
I can count that.
you women went everywhere. And the men weren't invited.